Glad everyone was able to make. Hopefully, you guys have all had a good 2 week span since we met when we talked about social media. So hopefully everyone's doing good. I will share my screen real quick. Um, Okay. So to share my sound, it says to share, please install the Zoom audio device. Enter administrator's name and password. Maybe mine works. You may just not be able to show the video. You're muted, Freddie.
Usually I have to, have it, let it use my computer sound, and I was looking for that and it's not coming up on my list, but probably because you're not sharing anything yet.
Oh, well, maybe it'll work. I just started sharing, so
Okay.
hopefully we have a quick minute clip halfway through this, so hopefully it works. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. You don't get to see a clip from Inside Out. So sorry if you don't get it.
Let's hope it works.
Yep. But as you guys probably read from the email sent out by Freddie, this is about suicide prevention. And with suicide, I know it can be a very sensitive topic for some people with either family members or someone close to them, or even personally going through some of these thoughts or even attempts. So if you at any time need to take a break, if you need to even just log off because it's too much and just watch the video later in bits and pieces, or just whatever you need to do to make sure you are safe and that you are taking care of yourself, please do that. Do not try to force your way through. Not very healthy. And I encourage you to remember Craig's mindfulness workshop that he presented before Christmas break. So it's been quite a while. So hopefully you remember some of your mindfulness tips and tricks that he presented to you guys. But with that, we are going to get started, and I'm just going to introduce first some of the statistics within Idaho about suicide, just to help us get an idea of like where we are and what it looks like in Idaho specifically. It's comparative to nationwide also, but since we are a more rural area, it's going to be exacerbated a little bit because of that. So suicide has remained the second leading cause of death among Idahoans aged 10 to 24. And this was about in 2021. And I double checked. I probably could have put it on the slideshow, but it's still, second leading cause of death as of right now in Idaho. As far as the stats go, males were far more likely than females to die by suicide, representing 8 in 10 Idaho suicides. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that females are not going to attempt suicide. Just means males typically use more dangerous methods to when they attempt suicide, or more lethal, I should say. So between 2017 and 2021, 132 Idaho school children ages 10 to 18 years old died by suicide. 34 of those deaths were to children aged 14 or younger. Firearms were the most common method of injury, used in 63% of Idaho suicides, and suicide rates were highest in less densely populated counties where mental health services are limited. And I want to point out that last bullet point because if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure we are all in a less densely populated county. And so this is going to pertain to you guys. And hopefully you haven't had too many experiences with this yet, and hopefully you don't have many in the future. But with it being such a common occurrence nowadays, we want to make sure that we are prepared for when a student does come in suicidal, that we know some of the steps that we can take to help them to prevent that attempt of suicide. Any questions before we do get going on? Anyone want to, everyone good so far?
I think it's important to note that there have been suicides and suicide attempts in many of the rural school districts just this academic year that we've been working with include and I know that there was a death of a teacher up in Rigby, I think. Um, so it's unfortunately um, a here and now kind of issue.
Thank you for mentioning that, Freddie. That's a good point to make. And I'm glad you also mentioned teachers, right? So even adults, we can look for those signs with adults if we're any of our coworkers, make sure that we are looking out for them too. And I'm sure we have all heard of the term suicidal ideation before. I just want to give us an example or a definition to put to that word because there's so many different ideas or what we think of as suicidal ideation. And is anyone willing to just read the definition for us? What a suicidal ideation is?
Suicidal ideation, often called suicidal thoughts or ideas, is a broad term used to describe a range of contemplations, wishes, and preoccupations with death and suicide.
Thank you, Scott. Um, so it's important to remember that suicidal ideation can mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that, that they are thinking or they have a plan of trying to attempt a suicide, but it can be the starts of that process, right? Of where they can lead to attempting one. So it can be wishing were dead or wishing they weren't alive, wishing they weren't around or no one's going to love them or no one's going to miss them kind of deal. And so looking out for some of those suicidal ideation signs, which we'll go over, just give you guys a broad term. It's from the National Institute of Health, is where I got this definition. Next is before I go on to this, I'm gonna go over signs and risks. Can anyone tell me the difference between a sign and a risk off the top of your head?
Feels like risks are things that are in their life, despite like their circumstances around them, possibly. And then like signs are things that they're showing in their own life. They give us some indication of it.
Awesome. That's a great way to put it, Scott. So I love that. So risks, like you said, are anything that has happened in an individual's life that increases the chance of suicidal ideation or attempts. So can you guys think of any risk factors that we could be looking for? So what are something that could happen in a child's life that could be a risk for suicidal ideation or attempt?
Trauma.
Trauma. Lucy says trauma.
Death in the family, breakups.
Good. Yeah.
This was my
Definitely.
last week. That's why this is easy.
Okay. Well, that's a good example. Thank you for sharing.
I know
Oh,
sometimes
students last week. Sorry, principal having to
Yeah.
deal with that.
What were we gonna say, TJ?
I was just going to say sometimes you would have to, or we're talking signs, right? Or risks.
We kind of jumped ahead. We're kind of on risk right now.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm a little more safer to say this then. It could be a demographic thing. There are associations that are higher with minority groups, Native Americans, orientation, and so on. It's sad, but that's what the research shows.
Good. That's good. That's a good thing to bring up too. Look at those demographics or some of those statistics behind it. Good. So I know I'm jumping out of order, but does anyone else want to share any other risks you can think of? Okay, I'm gonna jump to the risk and then we'll come back to the science since I kind of flip-flopped it. So I will go to the risk. So any mental health disorders that you know of, if they've been diagnosed with any mental disorders, that could be a risk. Alcohol and other substance use disorders, major physical illnesses, if they're physically disabled, okay, that could lead to a higher risk factor for them. I know someone mentioned loss of relationships, including death of a loved one, even easy access to lethal means, which in Idaho, okay, guns is a big thing, okay, and I know there's more than guns as a lethal mean, but guns are a very popular one for this. Exposure to others who have died by suicide. So if you have someone close to you, so any student that knows a teacher that may have died by suicide, or a friend, okay, or even just someone around them in their school, that increases that risk of that. Stigma associated with asking for help, lack of social support, loneliness, and sense of isolation, lack of healthcare, especially mental health and substance abuse treatment. So from this list, anyone want to talk a little bit more about any of these risk factors, clarify any of these, or share how they've seen this as a risk? Are you guys all good with these risks?
So by mental disorders, I mean, we're just kind of staying in some kind of the realm of more the emotional side, right? Or are there associations with specific learning, anything like that?
Yeah, anything. I mean, anything like that. So when I guess I put this together, it was more of the emotional, so like depression, anxiety, but learning disabilities also could fall under that realm. Any type of disability for that matter could fall under a risk factor. So good point, TJ. Thank you for clarifying that. Um, anything else you guys wanted to mention? Okay, we'll jump back to signs then. I'll
Just real quick, I was just gonna say, we just had a student that kind of put that out there, kind of in a text message form. And he
Okay.
was diagnosed as autistic, and he's not dealing well with his diagnosis. And so it was kind of, especially with this kid, we didn't know whether he was saying that he was suicidal. So he was very vague with how he put his words in a text. And you know how text is, you can't see emotion, you don't know context. And so with him, I would say the ambiguity was very much there.
That's a good point. Not being very direct about it. Hopefully, I hope you guys were able to get more context from that student and to get a hold of them. And we'll go over some of those too, but I'm sure you guys, whether you know it or not, I'm sure you guys go through those steps anyways, of how to contact these students that are at risk. But that's a good point, right? Especially with text nowadays, a lot of times that communication is text or email. So noticing that through social media or text is very important. Now signs, okay, we'll jump over to signs real quick. Signs are noticeable behaviors, actions, or thoughts that are associated with suicidal ideation or thinking of attempting. So what are some signs or some actions or behaviors that we can perceive or that we can see that these kids are displaying that can be a sign of suicidal ideation or possible attempt?
I think one is talking about feeling hopeless a lot.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. What were you going to say, TJ?
Sorry, I'm kind of awkwardly in and out this time. I was just going to echo what Angie was saying. For me, like it's mostly been kind of in writing, right? Like they're in a creative writing class, or they're maybe even going off on a historical narrative. But even in our ISATs one time, a kid was responding to a prompt for the ELA portion of the Idaho ISATs, and basically just threw out some words that the state flagged and emailed me about and just said, you need to look at the response that this student sent. And I was so grateful that they did that, because that ended up leading, us to a kid that had some unresolved stuff that he kind of had to process and whatnot. So that's just kind of here at my school where I've seen it is in writing, and just kind of these subtle hints, mostly in like English classes.
That's a really good point. And I didn't realize ISATs flag that stuff. That's pretty cool to know that they at least flag it.
Oh yeah, they flag it big time. I mean, because we had that one, and then we also had a kid who he's your typical farmer, right? Just wants to get his diploma and inherit the farm. And he was just like, I hate testing so much. I could go shoot myself, and the state called me on that. And they're just like, you need to go talk to him. And so I brought him in, and yeah, he was just like, no, I was just miserable taking this test. But anyway, yeah, they're pretty intense.
Well, that's good. That's good. Good to know. And I would echo that though, TJ, with I know the English teacher at the middle school, they look for those signs in their papers that they turn in, and they've actually caught a few students, talking about death or suicide, and being able to help give them some kind of support or help just from their writing. So I think that's very important, especially with teachers that see a lot of their writing. So that's a good point. Any other signs you guys can think of?
I was gonna say, I was thinking about the projects that I did with the school last year. For if somebody doesn't know, I did a survey of the mental health and suicidal ideation of I think it was 40-ish fifth through eighth graders. And I was absolutely just blown away that I think, it was between 20 and 30%. I'd have to look at the numbers again, had said that they had either considered suicide or attempted it, a fifth or eighth graders. And I worked at that school for, 3 years. I would not have been able to point to a student who I thought was showing signs of that. But there's like this large amount apparently, and our school is very small. So sometimes the signs, are not obvious. And it's actually kind of it sucks because you can't really always see them, you know what I mean? But if there was one, I would say self-isolation would be something to look at.
That's a good one. And I think that's important to remember, Craig. Like sometimes we sadly can't see the signs. Like maybe they don't display those signs. Maybe it doesn't look like anything's wrong. And I think an important thing we got to remember too is if something does happen with suicide, not to blame ourselves, especially as the counselor of some of these students maybe that you are working with, and just do your best to recognize the signs, but sometimes they're not recognizable, or sometimes they aren't displaying those signs that are easily observed. So to give yourself some, don't be so hard on yourself, I guess what I'm trying to say when these things happen. Any other signs you guys can think of? Okay, well, I'll just show you the list that I put on here. I think you guys may have mentioned a few that I didn't, but that's okay. So, which is good. Hopelessness, I think Kaylee mentioned that. Talking about dying, history of trauma or abuse. That's kind of more of a risk, but previous suicide attempts is a big one, right? So if they've attempted once, that's something we can look for, that they would attempt again. Extremely sad or angry. Making a plan is a big one. So if they start to say, if I were to kill myself, this is how I would do it, where I would do it, that kind of stuff. Look for the plan or the details. Taking dangerous risk. If they're normally like a very reserved person, or they don't do much, and all of a sudden they're doing crazy stuff, these dangerous risks, that's a sign. And then writing about dying in a journal or on social media. So kind of like the ISATs or the English papers that you guys mentioned. And even giving away their items. So if they start, donating, especially if it's a valuable stuff, be like, I don't want this, start giving it away. If it has meaning to them, that could be a sign of suicide. Any questions about the signs? I know some of them kind of correlate with risk, but any questions or comments? Okay. So we did risk, so we'll move on to how we can just notice the signs. Now, I know we mentioned, Craig, thank you for mentioning that sometimes we don't notice the signs, okay, or they're not there. But we gotta be able to notice these signs, okay? And then when we start to notice those signs, we can kind of look back and or ask some questions and get to figure out maybe what are some of the risk factors in their lives, right? So if we are seeing these signs, maybe we can, if we can build that relationship or that trust with them, we can start to dig and ask, like figure out some of the risk factors that we talked about, like what can increase the risk of suicide. And the part that we need to also do is when we start to notice it, we gotta start that conversation. Now you don't have to share this if you don't want to, but is there anyone in here that feels awkward talking to a student or another individual for that matter about suicide? Is this an awkward conversation for you to have? And I can start, and I'll just say, at first, that was awkward for me. That was hard for me to be like, no, are you thinking about killing yourself? Or are you thinking about suicide? And if it's not awkward for you, can you share maybe what you've done to help it not be so awkward for you?
Well, I had that conversation just 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago, with a couple students, because it's close to Christmas time. I'm in online school, so we start to see things in students, particularly when weather changes, right? And they're stuck at home more than they are when they already do school at home.
Yeah.
And I have just told myself that I have to ask the question, and then they laugh or they understand. Like for us, it's about relationship. We that's how I've changed my mind. This is about relationship. I don't have enough of a close relationship with most of the kids to know much more than something dramatic has changed. And so that's what I've told my staff. It makes a huge difference just to ask the question and put it out there, and then everything else seems easy.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Scott. Good example too.
I would say on mine, I tend to ask the question, do you wish that you would go to sleep and not wake up?
Hmm.
And then when I ask that, it seems like it's like a tampered down question. And because a lot of us have suicide ideation in that way, and because we've had a hard week or whatever. And then I go for do you have a plan?
Yeah.
So it tamps it down just a little bit, so it's not so, are you going to commit suicide? And so it's like, because we're not supposed to use the word commit anymore. And so it's not just at them, but it's more, hey, I've had times when I didn't feel like waking up the next day and facing the day and then going in for it. That seems to work better for me.
I like that approach though, Angela. I feel like that probably helps with some of those kids that maybe feel awkward themselves expressing those, and helps them to open up first.
And especially ones that I haven't, that aren't on my radar. Maybe the ones I'm thinking about are sometimes these overachieving kids that kind of aren't on the radar, but they don't. Some of our kids that have just had you just look at their life and go, holy hell, how do you get up in the morning? Of course you don't say that to them, but you're thinking that. But they're the ones that have the coping skills because they've had to cope all this time. It's the ones that are overachievers that are that have never really had to tap into coping skills. And sometimes I worry about those ones.
Like the perfectionist, like if they get something wrong.
Yeah, your student body vice president that's gotten all A's their entire life, and then they get a C, or something like that. And to us, we'd be like, wow, that's not much. But to them, because they've kind of had a rosy life, that sounds bad, but they kind of have. And they have, in tune parents and those kind of things. They haven't established coping mechanisms too, because they've never had to tap into that. And then
Yeah.
when they don't have them, it's like, oh my God, what do I do? And
Yeah.
they just, they're just really, really down. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think for some kids, that overachieving, that perfectionism, that performance is their way of coping. That so that they feel competent when they're achieving that. And
That they feel that in control feeling.
right,
Yeah.
right. So we don't always know what their risk factors are, what's going on behind all of that, but that can be their way of coping. So it's good to ask all of them.
Yep. Also, Freddie, for some reason I forgot to write down which slide do you have. So if there's ever a slide that is yours and I start talking, please just jump in and say Tyler knocked off.
I
Or-
will. I'll jump in. No worries.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I kind of want to do a quick follow-up question though. Because we talked about starting that conversation. We'll talk more about that on the next slide. But what do you guys do to like notice the signs? Because I know in my school, sometimes we have students come into the counselor and tell them like what they've seen. But typically, what do you guys like? How do kids get on your radar? Does it usually parents reach out to you, teachers reach out to you, other students, or the student comes directly to you? What does that look like for you guys? How do you guys notice those signs?
D all the above, Tyler. D all the above.
All the above. Good answer. Okay, so maybe there's a good mixture of everything, kind of just whatever happens. That's how you start to notice. Okay, I just didn't know if there was a common way of noticing those, but sounds like a little
So
bit of everything.
one of the things we do that every week, it's just one of our indicators, is we have students, we have a survey that they do every single week, and they rate what their emotional state is at the moment. So if there's anything that seems out of the ordinary, and they have a mentor that knows them well, and so if the mentor notices anything out of the ordinary, they reach out first and start a conversation. And they've all had that QPR training. And so they have the protocol to ask questions. And then I have pretty good relations with some kids, and then we have some kids that meet with our counselor. So we just have multiple layers of depth. That's one of the ways we've chosen.
Okay, I like that.
I think especially here we have to be on the lookout, and it's unfortunate, but the risk, I mean, the statistics sort of speak for themselves. We really do have to be on the lookout and be mindful of that. We can't make assumptions that kids are not feeling that way when they're at school, because they often are.
Yeah. Okay. So notice the signs. I know you guys have different ways of doing that, which is awesome. Next, we've already kind of started talking about this, starting the conversation, right? So bring up the topic of suicide with someone who has suicidal ideation. I want to get rid of this myth first. I'm sure you guys have probably heard this also, but it does not increase the chances of them dying by suicide, right? So by being open and talking with them about that, it actually has been shown that when they talk about suicide, they get a chance to actually express their feelings. They actually get a chance to express how they're feeling, and that lets them have an outlet and reduces the risk of them trying to attempt suicide. So I know you guys probably already don't believe in that myth anyways. I'm assuming you don't since you're here. So helping other people around you though, that are helping these kiddos to understand that that's not true. Okay. I think that's an important thing, especially in Idaho. A lot of people still believe that, sadly. It doesn't sound like many of you guys are awkward about starting a conversation like this. You probably have had this experience already, so that's good. But remember, some people around you may not be so comfortable with it, so help them not to feel so awkward about it, about starting this kind of conversation. And start simple by asking the basic questions, and let those basic questions, kind of like what Angela did, lead into deeper, more direct questions, right? So if we only dance around the topic of suicide for so long, we're never going to actually get to the point where they express their desires or they even tell us if they are or not suicidal. So we have to ask some of those direct questions. And sometimes those are the direct questions are sometimes the ones that are hard. And you guys have already shared some, so I'm just going to show you guys a list of what I have, and then there's probably plenty more, and maybe I'll ask for more from you guys at the end. But how are you coping with what's been happening in your life? This can be like a lead up question, like what Angela said, like what's happening in your life, and kind of gauge where they're going from there. And then you can ask a more direct question. But then, are you thinking about dying? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? Have you ever thought about suicide before or tried to harm yourself before? So these are some direct questions. Does anyone else have any other direct questions that they like to use, that they use?
I think on the one that says, are you thinking about hurting yourself? You have to be very specific, because if you're talking with a cutter or someone that you've been dealing with cuts, you have to make it very, succinct that you're not talking about self-harm, that you're talking about suicide.
Good point.
Because I've had that. And the other thing is, if you've had a kid, I had to do a form on a kid a week prior, and she did not have a plan. No, I don't have a plan, Miss Ogden. Okay. And the next week she came in and she had been rifling around at home in her room and found the pills that a bag of pills that she thought she'd thrown out. And so when she told me before that she, at that time, she had a plan a couple years ago and had these pills stashed. And then a week prior, she didn't have a plan. So she didn't tell me about that because she didn't know they were there. And then that day that I was talking to her, she'd ingested the pills, and then we went down that whole deal. So sometimes in context, they're thinking a plan right now, or a plan 2 years ago, or a plan. So I've noticed myself with just time, I've learned to ask specific time, because sometimes that's a telltale, you know what I mean, for myself.
Yeah.
I don't know, that helps me. I don't know if that would help you.
That's a really good point. Being very specific about what you're asking, and not just asking this one question, but having some follow-up questions in mind, right? So like, do you have a plan? And then you can specify, well, now or in the future, like, do you have an overall plan? I'm glad you mentioned the hurting yourself one though, Angela, too. Being able to find the difference and help them find the difference, or self-harm or suicide. So I think that's a very, very good point. Anyone else want to share? Okay. Well, the next part is the video. Hope it works. Can everyone see this? Okay.
A Burbo is for sharing all kinds of moments.
Garrett?
From post-concert.
So before I continue with the video, pay attention to, there's gonna be two people that interact with someone who's feeling down. I'll say that. So pay attention to how the first person interacts with that individual, and then how the second person interacts with them. Try to point out the difference between the two. So I'm assuming no one stopped me, so I'm assuming everyone can hear, so I'm gonna keep going with the video.
Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah. Sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
Okay. So what did you guys notice? What were the two different ways that those individuals tried to comfort that person who was grieving? And maybe which one did you agree with more?
I
mean,
think sometimes, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I loved how the one little girl was just emotion coaching, right? Like, this is really sad. And, she was just kind of really reflective of what was going on, but was still kind of productive with them.
Yeah.
I like how she validated the feelings, and I think that is so much. Well, that's what so much of what I do every day is just validating feelings. And once they feel validated, sometimes it's like then they can go on. I'm ready to go to the train station, But if you don't validate their feelings, they're still in this limbo.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think we do sometimes when we don't have time because of how our lives are. I think, Joy, she just wants to get over it. She wants to get done with it.
Yeah.
And I think we fall into that sometimes because we just want them to get over it faster,
Yeah.
But we sometimes because of time and how our world is.
I would agree. Good point. I would say that would probably be the two main differences the main difference that I noticed, right? The Joy was very like, oh, sorry that happened, but time to go. Let's move on. And instead of sadness, being able to sit there with that person and to explore or to coach, to validate those emotions that person was going through. And by letting them express those emotions, express those feelings, it helped them to, okay, I can keep going now. I can keep doing this. And I think that's very true with kids or students that we have that are suicidal. That, if we say, oh, you're okay, move on, it'll be better tomorrow, or it'll be better later on in the day. Sometimes just letting them express what they're doing or what they're feeling, coaching them on, that you're probably pretty sad about that, or validating what they're going through just helps them to, okay, I can now move on. I've been able to express that. So I love those points that you guys pointed out. Those points you pointed out. Okay.
Tyler,
So
I'm going to jump in for just a second. I hopefully some of you have seen some of the public service announcements around talking with people who are feeling depressed. And there's some good contrasting examples there about how people feel invalidated and dismissed when they express their sad or anxious or depressed emotions, and publicly giving the message, listen and validate how people are feeling so you can maintain those relationships. I think that's been a nice option to remind people of that.
That's true. Thank you, Freddie. And last thing on this is, I think we've kind of already mentioned this, or touched this, but being sensitive and aware of the feelings that that individual is going through, and pay attention as we are asking these questions. Pay attention to some of the warning signs of their behavior, right? Clue in on some of their how they move, how they act, and some of their language. Freddie, I'm thinking of moving on from the breakout rooms. Probably.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like a lot of people have had some experience. So
Yeah, we were gonna do a breakout room where you practice these direct questions, but like Freddie said, you probably have had experience with these questions already. So we'll move on to reporting. You guys probably deal with reporting, who you report to and how you report. At least I think you do. If you suspect suicide, right, report to appropriate authorities and remain with the person until help arrives. Does anyone want to explain maybe their reporting process, and if you've been through it, what that process looked like for you?
Ours, it's an immediate phone call to parents. So, and if you can't get a hold of a parent, I mean, you just stay there with them until the parent gets there. Sometimes, like up here on the mine, I was here till 6:30 till he got off shift, because that was the only person that could come. And I'm like, that's fine, that's just what it is. And other times, if a parent's not around, then it's sometimes in rural areas, you may have to go down with the family to the clinic or wherever you can, or the child might request you to go down, depending on the relationship with their parents. Yeah. I always have my principal involved as well.
Right. That's what I was just going to say, is that I usually, if I have an issue, I immediately contact my counselor and my superintendent, because I'm a principal, and then we contact parents immediately as well.
Sounds like most schools' reporting process sounds fairly similar. That's the same one at the middle school I work at. Very similar process, counselor, principal, and parents. So sounds like you guys know where you report to and who you report to. And that's a good thing. And I'm glad, Angela, you mentioned that sometimes you have to stay with that person. Sometimes it's going to be 6:37 and you just can't leave that person alone, especially if they are high risk and showing so many signs of suicide. They have a plan, they have the means. You can't let them go. And so I glad you mentioned that, because legally, right, if you let them go, that's a big no. Big can cause a lot of problems. So glad you guys know that. And what are some suspected means of suicide? So you can, if they talk about overdosing, firearm, a knife, hanging themselves. I know self-harm isn't suicidal, but some kids, when they talk about self-harm, like Angela already mentioned, differentiating between, are they talking about self-harm or are they talking about suicide, and being able to tell the difference. And if they're just flat out talking about suicide all the time and how it sounds nice to them, or how they don't want to be here, want to go to sleep and don't want to wake up the next day, being aware of that. And we are all mandated reporters. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask them right now, or if you want to just go read. So Lucy, put together this mandatory reporting procedure. Maybe I need to add that link to, so you guys probably don't have access.
You can put it in the chat.
now.
Just put it in the chat.
Yes, I will put it in the chat. So,
I just wanted to interject
at
for a
the
second. I
Please,
think
yep.
sometimes, often, the reporting piece can be really tough for kids. And people are always worried, often worried about their relationship with the person who is talking about suicide. And people may not want you to report. And being adamant about that. I don't know if any of you have had that experience where you've been working with one of the kids and they really don't want you to report, and how you've handled that, or if you've had to involve law enforcement as a last resort. I don't know if anyone's had any of those experiences. If you want to talk about that.
I've had dealings with law enforcement, and sadly, a lot of times those law enforcement, they don't have very much training, and so you're gonna have to be the, the I don't know, the upset one, I guess, and make them do something. I've had where, I've had to call because we couldn't find a kid on a weekend, and kids called me and said, "What do we do?" And call them in to do a welfare check to track down that kid, or he wouldn't answer the door, or making sure that so that law enforcement was there to make sure he was there and he was safe. And so, but then I've also had it where parents were pissed off at their kid and had them said their kid was suicidal and they weren't, and had them hold them for a 72-hour hold at BHC, and they didn't ask the questions. And so I think working with your law enforcement and finding one that you can work with well is a huge thing, I think, especially in rural areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. And Lucy just shared that document with you guys on the chat. So if you want to download that and have that, and she put a note in there that it was mainly for abuse and neglect, but the same steps could be taken and should be taken for suicide. And we kind of already talked about who do we report to, right? Counselor, parents, law enforcement, and principal. So remember that. Safety plan. Has everyone here seen a safety plan before or know what a safety plan is? Sounds like it for the most part. Some might be they've heard of it, but they may not know all the different steps or everything that could be in there. We'll go over each step. Now, depending on the safety plan that you use, some have, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 steps to it. The one I'm going to go over today, or we're going to go over today, has 6 steps to it. But if you have one that you like, that's only 5 or something like that, that's fine. As long as you have a safety plan in place that can help the kid, that's the important part. But this is a safety plan, and in that email sent this morning, there is a template that you can use. So if you want like an actual template of what a safety plan looks like that you can give to the kid, you can use that. And in that reference page, it's called mysafetyplan.org. You can actually go to that website and it fills out the safety plan with you or with the kid. So if you don't want to do it on paper, if you want to do it on a computer and then print it later or whatever, if they feel more comfortable doing that, or if they do it by themselves at home, whatever it is, they can do it online too. So there's that reference or that source for you. So please use it. Please use a safety plan if you have a kiddo that is thinking about that, or if you need to create a safety plan with you again. So safety plan. These are I'll just go over I'll put all the 6 steps that this one has. So we have step 1, warning signs. Step 2, the coping strategies. Step 3, the distractions that they can implement. Step 4 is their supports. Step 5 is professional supports. And step 6 is my safe environment. This link, I'll just show you guys real quick what it looks like, the one that I sent to you, or Freddie did. This is just what it looks like. And it kind of has some little notes for you and some ideas, or kind of helps you think about what to put in each section. So this is the template for you. And then the example one that I put the example safety plan together. And I just made one up. Okay, so like Bill, right? Warning sign is I just failed my midterm and my grade dropped to a D. Okay, some of those kids can't handle that. So the warning signs that this kid is going to have, I start having negative thoughts about killing myself. I start isolating myself from everyone else, and I stop doing the activities that I normally enjoy. Okay, and then for time, I guess we can go through these real quick. So then the coping strategies, right, is do a breathing exercise that they've learned, go for a walk, or call my mom. So that's what they can do to cope with it. And we'll go over each of these steps individually, what a coping strategy is, what a distraction is. My distractions, go to the gym or go watch my favorite TV episode. So like The Office or Friends or something. Okay. Or what's a new one nowadays? I don't know. My supports. So my mom, make sure that, because nowadays kids don't actually know the number, right? So if they don't have an access to their cell phone with the saved contact, maybe them actually having the number written down will help them remember. So my mom, my dad, my best friend Tom, okay, having them and their numbers listed. Now this one, like professional supports, we'll get to this. Sadly, not everyone's going to have a professional support, like a professional counselor. And so you may be their professional support. But having that down, and this one, 988, we'll also mention this again, but this is that suicide hotline. They are trained, or they have the training and the skills to help talk to that kid if they are feeling suicidal. And then where is their safe environment? Like this person may feel safe in the gym or feel safe at home with their mom or dad. Okay, so this is kind of a very simplified version of what it would look like. Now you may add more things in there, like what specifically they would do for their coping strategy or distractions, like maybe more information, but this is a very basic of what you should have in a safety plan. So that kid, if they start noticing those warning signs, what are they going to do to handle that or to overcome those suicidal ideations? So that's the safety plan. We'll go back to this. And I think the next one will be Freddie. We'll talk about the warning signs.
And this is helping the person that you're working with when they're developing the safety plan, for them to identify their warning signs. So some things that might be triggers for them, helping them to identify some of those triggers, and so they can just become more aware of their own reactions and their own emotional response. And then how should someone else know? And how would they know that they're starting to feel suicidal and wanting to end their life? So helping them to really recognize those signs for themselves and to help others as you work with family members or other significant people in their lives. And just writing that down can be quite powerful, actually, on this safety plan, getting them to take some responsibility for identifying those kinds of things. And I think that Tyler did a good job of providing a few examples about how people might respond. And everyone's going to be different. But getting the student or the person that you're working with to clearly identify that. And helping them to be able to identify their mood, to identify their emotions that are going on, put some labels to those kinds of things. and identify things they do that might be risky. That they're less direct activities that are warning signs. People they hang out with, activities that they engage in. Okay, now you can go.
So, both me and Freddie will do this one, the second step of my coping strategies. So once again, like Freddie mentioned with the warning signs, this is going to be very individual and personalized for that student, right? So every coping strategy is going to be different for someone. So my coping strategies, which I'll share some that I would put down if I was creating one, is going to be different than what Freddie would do or what Scott would do or Angela. Okay, everyone's going to be a little bit different, right? So some coping strategies that I personally would implement is I'm a very talkative person. I can ramble on. So talking to my wife and my mom, okay, I do implement those coping strategies a lot. Also part of what I have to do is I have to get active. So whether that's going for a walk and listening to I don't know what's going on outside around me, being mindful. Sometimes for me, it's also reading, like calming myself down, being able to calm. So those are my main ones. I would say a coping strategy, but also distraction for me is the gym. And we'll talk about why the distraction coping strategies are a little bit different, but gym is kind of like both for me. So
And coping strategies are really intentional in knowing when you're feeling those emotions, things that you can do to really take care of yourself, things that help you to feel better and less anxious, less depressed. And those feelings are okay, and helping the person that you're working with to accept those feelings and to not judge them as unworthy, but to also have some ways that they can start to feel better. So for me, I like to write in a journal. I'll talk to my sister. Maybe like Tyler, just read a book, have a cup of tea. I'm a much fairly introverted person, so my comfort zone is to be on my own. So doing some things that are really comforting to me. And so helping the person that you're working with to identify what are those strategies that help you to feel good about who you are, have a bit of a sense of pleasure, and to acknowledge that that's okay. There's a lot of distress tolerance skills and a lot of different things that you can teach kids or people that you're working with that are really struggling in this area, with how to cope, and give them some ideas. There are lots of different things if they're struggling with how to deal with this, which is not uncommon.
and with that, does anyone else either want to share their coping strategies that they may implement, or any just general examples of different coping strategies that could be implemented?
I can. It's Lucy. I'm here, I promise. Basically something that I like to do a lot is put my face in a bowl of cold water with ice in it. It activates something called the mammalian diving response. It basically just kicks your system into deep breathing and it slows your heart rate down. And for days where I can't talk myself out of a panic attack or things like that, it's really helpful to just have something to like reboot my system. So cold water, holding your breath in cold water is really good.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Lucy?
I would say mine kind of piggybacks off of that. Breathing I've noticed has really helped me. So I'll do like box breathing when I'm feeling really panicky. So I like breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And that's something that's really kind of helped me to be able to like tune into my body and what's happening and be able to calm myself down and think through what's happening. Yeah, that's one thing that's really helped.
Awesome. I think some of those breathing exercises, if you're able to, are very useful. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, I think I have a list here, but does anyone else want to share? If not, that's okay. I'll give you escape. So, some examples, right, are this one I found pretty interesting. I just wanted to take a second on this one because it says take the time to find 5 beautiful things during your daily routine. Because I think we get in a rhythm, at least I do. I get in this rhythm where I just go from one to the next, and I don't really have time to appreciate what's going on around me or to take a second and notice what is going on. And so being able to find those, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be beautiful, but nice or joyful things that happen during your daily routine, stuff you like, just take that time to start to notice that. Can be very impactful. Take a nap, which some of us may do right after this. Take a nap. I wish I could. Compliment someone and yourself. Be kind to yourself. Compliments go a long way. Take a hot shower or bath, or take a cold one, depending which one you like and which one helps you. Take off a day from social media, and I think that says the internet. I think the picture kind of cut it off. I'm assuming, yep, that's gonna say internet. So take a day off from social media and the internet, exercise, hang out with friends. So those are just some examples, right? There's so many different things that you could do to cope with what's going on. And make it personal, and when you're working with a kid, help them find what they like to do. It may seem odd to you to put or to go work out, right? But for that person, it may work for them, or maybe, sound kind of painful to put your face in a bowl of ice water. But for some people, that helps, that works. And so helping them find that is what I'm trying to say. Individual. And the next thing I want to talk about is distractions. So distractions so step 3, once you figure out warning signs, you come up with their coping strategies. Okay, this is what I can do to cope with this. And distractions is more of, like, let's say your coping strategies aren't necessarily working at this time. Let's say, it is just so overwhelming, the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts that you are having or that they are having, that you can't handle it. And a distraction helps to take your mind off of what is going on. And that's why for me, the gym is kind of both, because when I go work out, I kind of just let everything else just dissolve behind me. Like, I kind of put it all behind me. Don't worry about it. I'm not necessarily coping with it. I'm not like working on it, trying to solve the issue, but I'm distracting myself from it. And by the end of me being done with my distraction, I will be in a better state of mind to cope with it. And that's the goal of distraction, right? To know where you can go to at least distract yourself. Now, like we kind of mentioned a couple weeks ago, distracting yourself for so long is not going to be healthy, right? You have to deal with the problem at some point. But if you need a time to, get away from it, clear your mind, get to where you are ready and able to cope with it, having those distractions is very good, or can be very helpful.
I think it's important to think about this as a really temporary safety measure. So being able to go and do something else, maybe be with other people, then you can come back to some of those coping skills.
And does anyone else have any distractions that they can think of that they have implemented before?
I like to play video games. That's like my go-to. I'll just like tune into a video game for like an hour or two, and it really helps to like de-stress and just calm myself down for a little bit and be able to like enjoy myself. And then afterwards, I can face whatever it is that's stressing me out.
Good one. Okay. Anyone else want to share a distraction that they may use? Okay. So the next step, so step 4 is going to be my supports. Okay, so this is not necessarily professional support, so that will be the next step. So step 4 though is anyone in your life that you can turn to talk to. So friend, like I kind of already mentioned, right? So coping strategy and supports can kind of work together. Like if you're part of your coping strategy is to talk to your support, then that's what you do, right? So for me, my supports would be my wife and my mom. That's who I would talk to. That's who I know would support me through this time where I'm struggling. And that's what you really want them to think about. Who's going to support them? Who's going to be more like the emotion sadness in that video, right? Who's going to validate their experiences? Who's going to sit with them, listen to their emotions, let them express it, rather than Joy be like, oh yeah, you're fine. Thanks for sharing, but we got to go, right? So helping them find that not helping them find the sadness, but helping them find that person that is like that sadness and inside out, not Joy. Is anyone willing to share who they would reach out to? Who would be your support, or who is your support in times of stress or hard times?
I usually reach out to people who are gonna give me their honest opinion, even if it's not what I want to hear. I have a few friends like that.
We all know someone who's pretty straightforward with us, which is a pretty good thing, actually. Can give us some good direction.
I've got some.
Obviously, close people.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Nothing big. I was just saying my supports are like family, friends, church.
It's good.
Yeah, I've got some friends and a couple of family members. I wouldn't say all of them that are good listeners and non-judgmental. And I think that's really important that you can feel free to express how you're feeling and know that you're not going to be judged in some way. You're going to be accepted.
Yeah, that judgment-free zone, right? I think that's very, very important. Excuse me. And it sounds like actually a lot of you guys do that for your students, the judgment-free zone. And I think that's awesome. So, who can you reach out to for support? Friends, family members, teachers, okay? And this will be different than professional help. This one, that's supposed to say can, not CNN, sorry. 988 is going to be more on the professional slide. I should have moved that, sorry. But this is in the moment of those suicidal thoughts, right? So who can you talk to, reach out to help you through that? And Freddie, so remember, this is different than professional help, and Freddie's going to talk more about what a professional support would be.
Okay. I've lost my, oh, there we go. Lost my notes. I think this is a challenge for many of us, and really why we've created this Include project and the work that we're doing here is because our access to professional sports supports in Southeast Idaho or in rural, especially in rural communities, is very limited. There are long waiting lists. There's difficult access, sometimes transportation problems, maybe not having the kind of expertise that you need in a local agency. So that's part of why we created the Include project, so that we could expand available services. And I think the thing that we heard from most of the schools when we were doing our listening sessions last spring was that there was a huge need for mental health services because there was so much suicidal ideation, and had been students and family members that had died by suicide. So this is a really important part of what we're doing, trying to expand those professional supports. So the 988 hotline is relatively new. You can put that back up there. It's relatively new, but accessible across the country and supported in every state, so that people can get immediate access if they need that, if they don't have a professional. I know many of the school districts have contracted with mental health providers, but even with that availability, there are long waiting lists, unfortunately. So we really want to encourage people to take advantage of this free service through Include, to reach out to us if there is a need to connect with a counselor. And we've tried to make ourselves available when there's an emergency, when there has been a death, especially in a school district, whether that's by suicide or some other means, accidents or medical emergencies. We really want to try to expand access to mental health services. We know how important that is, and it's really the pandemic shined a very bright light on this need. So we're doing our part to be available. And I think we're not so good, and maybe that's later on, but we're not so good at asking for help. So trying to make it as easy as possible to get people access to services. And there are crisis centers, there are crisis resources available in many communities, not every community, but in many communities. So taking advantage of that and knowing what resources you have available to you in your particular community. Any comments about professional supports?
I would just say one thing is, I came here 15 years ago when there really wasn't anybody here doing mental health. And so I felt like my job as a school counselor was to take that on, because we were so isolated. And so my job has changed a lot over time. Thankfully, we've got more people into mental health here than we did before. But what I was going to say is getting them in the chair, getting them there to be seen by someone is really tough. And then when it doesn't go well, or they say, oh, I just didn't make a connection with that person, then you've got that, I'm pushing, well, let's find somebody else that you feel more comfortable with. But just getting them in the car and at the appointment. And then, up here, we used to have Lehigh Valley Social Services come from Salmon. So in this time of year, in January, when they're, when the roads are horrible and they have to drive 60 miles on the river road, and then they don't make it to their appointment, it's like, it's tough. And so isolation really is a thing. Thankfully it's gotten better. And I really try to push kids. I can push kids to different people now, where I, before didn't have that availability. But I think just really being with them and knowing, especially it's hard to go and be vulnerable with someone, and to really push that, that, okay, if that one doesn't work, we'll try something else, and really pushing that on them. Especially, I'm thinking of my guys, that, don't want to talk about it. So anyway, I'm thankful now that we have some people. So I guess that's changed for me.
It can be really scary to talk to a stranger, and I mean, sometimes that can be supportive as well, knowing that somebody doesn't know necessarily all of your background and doesn't have the same relationships that you have. That can be helpful, but it also can be scary and worried about whether or not you'll be judged or they'll be able to help you, that your situation is so terrible that no one will be able to help you. I think there's you know, some of those kinds of concerns. Want to go on to step 6?
Sure thing. Step 6, last step, is my safe environment. So where can these students be safe? So um, anywhere that they can either be safe to express their feelings and emotions, right? So you don't want them to be expressing their feelings or what's going on somewhere where they don't feel safe. So out in public or where other people can hear them, probably somewhere private. And where you can go when you're having suicidal thoughts, where you can feelings and thoughts where you can go to feel safe and secure. And part of that safe environment has to be where there is no access to means of suicide. So if they have a plan to overdose on pills, right? Right. So they're on their safe environment should be a location where they feel safe, they feel secure, but where they can't take any of those pills, where they can't execute that plan that they have put in place. Whether that's at home with surrounded by their mom and dad or siblings, or over at their friend's house, out on the park, gym, I don't know, anywhere that they can feel safe. And another one I want to mention is, or I guess I more want to ask a question, is what can we do to help school feel as a safe place for these students? So what can we or you personally do to help these kids feel safe at school? I guess it's a safe place for them.
I think you could just, I know I like to remind them of why we're all here, as staff and faculty. I mean, the pay, to be honest, the pay sucks. So we're only here out of love and, you know, to help kids grow. And, you know, if they can't be safe here with us, then, you know, why are we even here? Why are we even working? So I just like to, you know, let them know that we are here for them, and anybody is willing to listen, and, you know, just kind of keep an eye on them. So I think when we can help kids understand what the purpose of, you know, teachers and staff's purpose, I think they start feeling a little bit more comfortable. It's that reminder of, oh yeah, like this is why, you know, I'm compelled to be here every day. It's not for these guys to give me grades or assignments. It's, you know, because we have a purpose for me as the kid to grow and to become something. So I've liked reminding our students really what our purpose is and why we all chose this profession.
I like
Yeah,
it.
and I think that the biggest thing is that all the research says the most impactful stuff in the student's life, even success, mental well-being, is just having meaningful relationships with adults. And um, so I think on the administrative side, I just have to emphasize that over the top. Can't be over communicated that you are not here just to give content. You are here to be a relationship for students.
That's awesome. That's a very good point. I like both of those points. Help them understand that we're not here to collect a paycheck. We're here because we love you and we want to help you grow and to build those relationships for you to help have some positive influence in your life. Like both of those. Any other ideas or things you may have done? Okay. Well, we will move to the last. Oh,
I think there were a couple of articles that we posted on the website for Include that identified some strategies that some schools were using to really promote mental health and spaces that they were creating in their schools. So I think there's some good ideas there. I'm remembering something about a specific kind of relaxation space that I think a school in Missouri had created, using some of their, I think some of their COVID relief funds to be able to create some of those spaces. So thinking about where are there spaces in your school that that can be safe and comfortable and a good spot for kids to go for a little time out if they need that.
We got a grant for a reset room in our school, and my room was the reset room prior to that. But it's kind of funny because um I think that they thought that I was just letting them just be in here and hang out, and it's like, no. This was where they were resetting and hopefully going back to class and being productive, because as you guys well know, kids that are emotional and crying, and I don't know how they're going to do well just sitting in a classroom when their emotionality is just all over the place. But we have now a reset room, and now my room is kind of crickets. It's a little quiet. It's a little hard to get used to, but I'm dealing. But so we kind of do like a triage kind of thing. So I work with the gal at the reset room, and if it's something that is a little bit more over the top, then she can just talk with them, and then she pushes them toward me, and so then I can get the things I need to get done as well. So it's a little harder for me because I really want to be there for those kids, and I've had to really adjust my feelings on it. I'm still a little bit, but I see the reset room as a good thing. And then with a small community and kind of a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of community, getting out there to the community that's not, they think it's so warm and fuzzy and these things, and they don't realize that we're just trying to help them kind of reset themselves and then get back into class. But just giving those kids that option, I think, gives them a good safety net of feeling safer in the school overall. So I think it's been a good thing.
That's
That's
really
awesome.
nice that you have that. Yeah, and gives you a little bit of a break, so that kids have a place to go if you have something else that you have to do. So it sounds like you've got some supports attached to that. So that's nice.
Get a reset room in our school, hopefully. I wish. And ask for help. I think Freddie was gonna end with this one.
Yeah, so and we talked a little bit about this, but helping kids and everyone that you're dealing with identify those support people, the people that they can reach out to and they can ask for help. We're not very good overall as a society in promoting the idea of asking for help. I think in some places we're getting a little better at this, but it's that, like you said, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of approach, that I don't need any help, but we all need help. Every one of us, we can't really survive without the assistance of others, whether that's formal law enforcement and healthcare, or just our friends and family and our neighbors. So it's really important to emphasize that with the students, with the people that you're working with, and again, that helpline, the suicide hotline, which is really a great asset for our country, for everyone. And of course, if someone's really in danger, immediate danger, you can call 911. So we do have resources. I know that many of the schools and many public spaces did have free naloxone if somebody had overdosed on heroin or opioids, and we've stopped funding that free service. But hopefully there are still some resources in your community if you need those kinds of emergency services. Any questions? Any comments, thoughts? We have about 4 minutes. Thanks for everyone's engagement today.
Yes.
We have
Thank
two
you.
more sessions, one on grief and loss, and then the last one on working with diverse students. We're looking to possibly put together some workshops that will be maybe held in the Soda Springs, well, directed towards the Soda Springs coaches and parents. And we're working on developing that. But if people are interested, we can, because they'll all be on Zoom, we can provide some access if people are interested. So once we have those identified, we'll let you know. Anything else you want to add, Tyler?
Nope. Just thanks for participating and sharing. And sounds like you guys are already doing a pretty good job with handling suicide prevention and helping those kids who are suicidal or struggling with some of those ideations. And but hopefully this was helpful, to a good refresher for some of you guys, and to hopefully implement maybe a few more strategies in your schools. But thank you.
And I'll try to get the recording done and post it up on YouTube. And when you get a chance to submit your reflection papers to either me or to that include email address.
And there's that form. Lucy just sent that out.
Good, thanks.
So sorry, I was a little late today.
She said she's missing something. Oh, well, okay. If you have time, so I think we go till the 23rd of February. So I'll send out a reminder and notices to everyone about final due dates and everything on those, so I can get the information submitted to Albion, and you can all get your credit and your rebates and everything. So I'll be taking care
I
of
just
that.
feel like I missed one of the videos because I was busy, and I don't know that I got a video. You know what I mean? I didn't join.
Oh,
physically.
you should be able to check your emails, because I sent the link out to everyone, not just people that missed, but to everyone. So check your emails from me and see if you should have links to all of the videos there on YouTube.
And this was our 5th one, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and we have 2 more.
if we don't have 5 after this one, then maybe you didn't miss one.
Yeah. If there's one you can't find, just let me know and I can make sure that you can have access to the video. Check my emails, the emails I sent you, because all the links should be in there.
Okay.
And
I'll
then
try.
again, Freddie, we don't have to send that reflection papers due like in February, right? With all of them.
You can do them all at the end if you want to. That's fine. Yeah.
Perfect.
So I'll probably by the end of the month we'll make sure that those are all due, and then I can submit everything to Albion. So
Okay.
I've been keeping track of who's here and who submitted papers, and so we're good. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good job today.
Thank you. Have a good 2 weeks.